saying he wasn't a great politician. I'm just saying he's a
It's just an interview.
How'd you play out there today?
Well, I found the conditions challenging, mostly because there's no grass on the golf course, but there never has been.
I'm thinking about this back there, and I had high hopes for this back there.
Trash. When you got 3 crevices on the green, your course is trash.
What's happening, folks? Welcome back, Beltway Golfer. This is going to be episode 25. Alex Dixon here. So this is part 2 of our conversation with Tom Clark, which took place down at Cutalong at Lake Anna. And the majority of the conversation is going to be about that course. We dive a little bit deeper and get into specifics on the course, which is an interesting one and an ambitious one. First off, it's taken over 20 years from the beginning of the project and the concept to now having a finished project and opening due to a lot of different reasons, which he gets into. But, ownership changes, just a lot of different hurdles that are probably not uncommon when trying to open up a new development or a new golf course, but are generally hidden from the general public. But it sounds like this one maybe had more than most, taking over 20 years. But it is finally getting ready to officially open. It's been open for play for a few months now, but officially opening later this summer in 2021. It's an interesting concept. It's an ambitious course in that Tom and kind of his partner on this project, he's listed as a consultant, but Ron Whitten, who is I'm probably going to get his title wrong here, he says it in the interview. He was essentially the lead of golf course architecture for Golf Digest magazine for many, many years. And the two of them kind of worked together to draw inspiration and pay homage to other great golf course architects, to other great holes, to other famous features from other holes, and brought elements from all of those different things into this course. The result is some really interesting golf holes. The style is different from hole to hole because one, they've got a Pete Dye hole, and then the next hole drawing on a totally different concept or paying homage to a totally different architect. So it's pretty interesting to go around the course and seeing kind of these very different designs and holes throughout the 18. So unusual in that aspect. That I'm not sure I've played a course quite like it before. So he gets into a lot of the details of where a lot of those concepts came from and what led them to this project. The other thing I'll note is we had played the course. We teed off, I think, at Cutalong probably before 10 a.m. And by the time we got to this part of the conversation, because we took our time playing the course, I was taking pictures, he was pointing out different details around the course. We had almost run out of daylight, and so we had been out there for probably 6-7 hours already. So you may be able to tell, I think both of us maybe were running a little, our tanks were a little empty by this point, so blame that on me. I know I certainly was. I don't know about Tom. But I still found it a very interesting conversation, and he gives a lot more detail on the project. And then the last 15 or 20 minutes, talks a little bit more about, his career as a golf course designer. So I enjoyed it and thought it was worthy of certainly a 2-part podcast. Hope you enjoyed as well. Here it is, episode 25, Tom Clark at Cutalong at Lake Anna.
First of all, I have a question for you. Did you have fun today?
I had a lot of fun. I was focused a lot on talking to you and taking pictures and taking it all in, and so I'm excited to come back and really kind of try to score on this course and play it again.
Well, the objective, both Ron and I agreed on that long ago, was we wanted to create something that would be fun. And that's, I think, from the beginning when I said I wanted to create something, and I asked this question 20 years ago. Why hasn't anybody done a National Golf Links again? In other words, there were these copycat courses, renditions or whatever, where they actually tried to copy, the Amen Corner or, I think Golden Ocala or whatever, where they just
Sure.
had the LPGA
Like a
event.
replica course.
Yeah, they were exact replica courses.
Mm-hmm.
This was supposed to be an eclectic match of different things to emulate, potentially famous designs, but they're classed together, like our Pebble Beach green with the Augusta National
Sure.
bunker. And
But originally, your original thought for Cutalong,
was the National Golf Links.
meaning you were thinking about emulating those exact holes, or just the idea of
No,
National
the
Links?
idea.
Got it.
It was always the idea, but it was Charles Blair McDonald cherry-picked, his favorite holes, which have become classic design features. I mean, the Biarritz, the Redan, the Alps. I mean, he kept doing it all over. I mean, you go down to Old White, and that's what he did down there. And, you go to most of his courses, and then Seth Rayner took up the mantle and continued to do all this, over and over and over again. Well, I became so enthralled with this when Cutalong didn't start, 20-some years ago, that I started taking some of those features and putting them on my courses all over the country. Up at Glade Springs, the last course I did has 4 or 5 features at Williamsburg National.
Where is Glade Springs?
Glade Springs is up in Beckley, West Virginia.
Okay.
Daniels is actually the town, but it's a resort. I did the original course Stonehaven, then I did Woodhaven, and that's where I put all these features in.
Okay.
I did...
I don't get outside the Beltway much.
Okay. Williamsburg Nationals in Williamsburg, and I did a lot of the features on the course there. It's the Yorktown course. And then I went down to Texas, and I did a course down near Lig City, and it was 27 holes, and I actually did what this original concept was here at Cutalong, which was the English 9, the Irish 9, and the Scottish 9. And I did it at Cahoon Plantation, which you said you had played.
Yeah.
And
Also recently closed.
Yeah, and good old Wallace. That was one of my best par 3s, and that was the first thing to go. And then one of the 9s went, and another one, and now I think it's all closed. But
How does that, as a golf course architect and designer, you over the years, like every doesn't matter what golf course architect you have, projects of yours and courses that you've had have closed. It's got a sting.
they're your babies. In other words, what I told you about a lot of the par 3s I did, and I mentioned Fair Oaks Golf Park. That was an interim use. In other words, it was always going to be developed, but Tim had the property for, 10 or 15 years from his stepfather, and he finally said, okay, I want it, I'm going to develop it while I'm still living, and he did. So that went away. I did Hunter Mill Golf Park. That went away. Southview or Potomac Ridge, that went away. You just told me Cross Creek's going away.
Right. And it's so often it's just because, the sprawl goes further and further out, and that land becomes so much more valuable as homes than a golf course.
Because what it was in 1999, quite honestly, it was more profitable to build a golf course than it was development. In other words, the golf course, you keep making money every year. Now, this was when they were charging $100 a round and, country club for a day. The development, you sell one time, and it's gone. So you've made your money, but you don't keep making it year after year. So that's what they were looking for. And that's what I said. Back in 99, I had 4 or 5, 36 and 27 hole projects. It was just, the more golf, the better it was. And
So to cut along, so you kind of touched on it for a second. So this original project was started, or at least the idea, or it started to get going. You were hired originally in 1999. Do I have that right?
1999, 2000, started here.
So for those counting at home, that's 22 years ago.
Yeah. And did literally a 27-hole layout, and it was basically, as I said, the English, the Scottish, and the Irish 9s. Then the second owner, and the first owner was a wonderful guy. He's been out here and played golf, Alan Mendelson. He was the one that did the dredging up Contrary Creek and created that wonderful chunky monkey, which won't grow grass, and then we used it around the 4th tee area. And, he wanted golf because he was a golfer. He basically had well and septic, and it was only 300 lots, and it would have been sold out in no time. But he got talked in by an engineering firm, who shall not be mentioned, to do sewer and water. You can get 900 lots. He said, oh, 900 is better than 300. Well, they didn't tell him it cost him $15 million or whatever to do sewer and water. So that was out of his, I guess, comfort zone. So he sold it to the next people who did a lot of planning. We reduced the course to 18 holes. We had a design charrette up in Baltimore that lasted 3 days. I never saw so many people for, a golf community. But it was they had marketing people, engineers, environmentalists, land planners, myself, and it was just, we got her done. We got the new master plan done. And then, unfortunately, they never broke ground. So Mr. Snyder, the third owner, basically partners with them initially and then decides he doesn't like partners, so he buys them out. Well, he not only had to pay them off, but there was still a note on the property from Mr. Mendelson. He had to pay him off. So a lot of his money went to paying off so many different people. So when it came to developing, he was starting to run short of capital. And hence, that's when he went out to borrow some money and unfortunately couldn't pay it back. And foreclosure happened, bankruptcy. And I really, at that time, thought Cutalong was never going to happen. I thought, we had developed 3 holes.
And by when that happened, what year is this?
This is 2014, 15, somewhere around there.
Oh, so this is good 15 years after the original.
Oh, yeah.
Gotcha.
Nothing happens quick here at Cutalong. Wow. So then it sat there all these years, and then finally it was sorted out through the bankruptcy that the parent company of Stillwater, who took it over, was the lender. And then, I had to resell myself again. And the only reason I think it really got built, and I've said this to a lot of people, is the people that are in Stillwater are young go-getters and they're golfers. They love golf. Matter of fact, the owners are down in Kiowa right now playing in a tournament that our pro is down there with them who set it up. And they wanted, to see this thing through, and they basically made it happen. And as I said, the struggle has become reality. And, as I said, it will just keep getting better. We're still not done, as you saw today. I said we're still finishing bits and pieces of construction, and we're finishing bits and pieces of grow-in. And our grand opening will be, July 1st. And by then, everything should be in super condition.
20 plus years. I can't imagine you've had any other projects that have taken nearly that long from concept to opening.
No, but we talked about that other possibility,
Sure.
and that's kind of goes back to that era also.
It does happen.
Yeah, and it was funny because I was contacted, and a friend of mine, Greg Muirhead, who works for Reese Jones, lead designer, and he said, I had one of those projects. It was like 20 years, and it was like, they happen. And it's what I always used to tell our associates. I said, once a golf course, always a golf course. So, we've designed something, it'll come back someday maybe, and we'll get a call. And that's why, it's important that Brian and I continue to at least let people know we're still alive. It's one of those things that, they'll say, oh, here's an off-Clark plan. I wonder, we'll get, Core Crenshaw to do this. But no, maybe all Clark could do it. And I think when they see that, we can create something really special still, because architects really, very few of them ever retire. I know Trent Jones worked up till the very end. I've never really known a golf architect to, retire. I know one retired, but it was for health reasons. And,
Sure.
He passed away a few years later. But
when you've got a job like designing golf courses, I don't know why you'd want to retire.
well, and you know the situation here. I have a lake house 5 minutes from this golf course. So I've been dreaming about this thing, for years. I started another golf course on this lake even before Cutalong.
Is that right?
It's now called the Waters, but it was laid out for a developer.
not open.
He basically started clearing it, and he got into his clearing. He actually started to build some ponds, and then he basically went belly up or whatever. And then the contractor who had done the work got the golf course because they were first in line, and consequently they tried to finally sell it, and they did. But I had people that came down here wanting to finish the golf course, but all the property that the golf course was on, because of the lakes and stuff that they had done, they turned into wetlands. They were man-made, but still they were classified as wetlands, so we really couldn't do the golf course anymore. So Lake Anna's always wanted a golf course, and this is the first one. And I said to you earlier, I said it's in between Washington, D.C., Richmond, Virginia, Charlottesville, and Fredericksburg. And, it just draws people, and the more people last year came down looking for housing. I mean, the lake, you can't find any properties,
right?
Because they bought up, so much getting out from the urban areas.
So let's talk about the course a little bit. So one thing you touched on, you mentioned Ron Whitten. Ron Whitten was the senior head of golf course architecture for Golf Digest.
He was the architectural design editor for Golf Digest.
Architectural design editor. And when did you and he kind of get together? Because he's listed as a consultant as coming up.
Ron and I were friends from long before that, because Ron, as the senior architectural editor, wanted to see all new golf courses. Every year they have a competition, best new course, Golf Digest. Ron also runs all the rankings and ratings for Golf Digest. He's the one that puts all these people together, and basically if you qualify with a 5 handicap or less, you apply. Ron then teaches you what you're supposed to evaluate, on a golf course and how to rate it. And that's where the top 100, the, best in state, all these things come from, is Ron. So Ron would always, because I was, kind of the guy that did all the new courses. So Ron wanted to play these courses, with the architect. I mean, part of his, I guess, wish list was he's now played with over 100 and some golf architects. So we had played a lot of golf together. He had seen a lot of my work. He had commented a lot of my work. I will never forget this one quick story aside. When he came out to Laughlin, Nevada, I did a course out there, and he called me up personally. This is when I first really got to know him, and he said, "Tom, I think you're going to win Best New Course." He said, "I have only one more course to see, and it's up in Las Vegas. It's got this guy by the name of Steve Wynn. It's called Shadow Creek." And if you know the history of Shadow Creek,
sure.
As I said, the same golf contractor, Wadsworth, did
But
my
did yours
course.
cost $500 a round?
No, mine is there, but it's not open anymore, because our whole thing was we could withdraw water from the Colorado River for, I think, 10 years. And then the development, the 4 casinos, were going to have effluent water, and we could use that. Well, that went bankrupt. All these skeletons of these casinos are there, but no, they never finished it. But anyway, so we had always known each other, and I said, when I did the 27-hole layout, I had some of my interns look up, great holes, then it was books. We couldn't look this stuff up on the internet. There was no Google Earth or whatever. And we picked these holes, and I have a thing back in my house here is the 27-hole layout, and each one had a name, and each one had a write-up on it. And, we matched the hole to, what it was, like this par 3, if it was here, would have had a name and what it was supposed to look like. And then I said, I'm going to call Ron, but it's the new layout now, 18 holes. We've talked about it before, because I said, I've seen thousands of golf courses because of my fact that I traveled a lot, because I was in the American Society of Golf Architects for, all these years. And, Ron has seen even more. And I'm just saying, I'm going to get somebody I can pick his brain. Well, Ron's brain is rather unusual. It travels in different directions. And as I said, it immediately went into the Civil War because we were approaching the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. And it then went into other architects, why does it just have to be Irish or English or whatever? Why can't we pick an American like a Pete Dye or a Trent Jones? And so we did. And I picked the Trent Jones on number 1, and he picked the, Pete Dye on number 5. But all that bulkheading is the Tom Clark Originals with Gonzo. So that was a lot of fun. We had fun with our paint guns and chainsaws and stuff, making all that stuff and putting it together.
So when did that, so when we've talked about this, over 21 years of stops and starts of Cutalong, the concept for the course has also evolved quite a bit, starting from, National Golf Links to 3 nines, to what it is today. When did those conversations with Ron really happen?
2005. I mean, it started, the whole 27 holes went away, and we had the 18. So I had him come visit the site in 2005. We spent 2 days out in the field just walking and walking. And within 10 days, Ron came back with 100 and some page write-up. Now, he had a write-up on each hole, but then he accompanied this because he has massive files. So I remember we were going to do what I said, the railroad hole. We were going to use the road hole at St. Andrews. He had probably 30 pages of that stuff. So I still have that original transcript. But what I did, I started cherry picking through all that and said, okay, this is what we're going to put on paper. And, then I had my, CAD guys work on this. Because at that time we were ready to build a golf course, but it didn't happen. And then, as I said, then the second owner came, and then when we finally did start, I was under the same guidance with Mr. Snyder. Said, we're going to, actually start building the golf course, but, we've got to be under $3 million. Well, that was, that's not much in 2013. So that's when some of the bunkers disappeared, and then he got a management company involved, and some of the other bunkers disappeared because they didn't even bother to read that these holes are emulating famous holes. Well, you just can't take bunkers out, when you're trying to create a green like, Pebble Beach or something. People know that they see it on television. Well, they're going to say, this doesn't look anything like that.
Right.
So that's the evolution, and then it continued to evolve all the way through construction. That's what I said. There were situations that, things that you hit out in the field, like rock or something, you change this, there's certain budgetary constraints, you change that. And the beauty is, at the end of the day, you still wind up with a great product.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm happiest at.
And you, at the beginning of this, you mentioned that, National Golf Links and even renditions as almost like, replica courses. But I mean, I wouldn't say this is not a replica course.
Not at all.
This isn't at all.
Well, then National Golf Links is not a replica course either.
It's taking the ideas
right.
and inspiration from great golf holes.
That's what it is. We're emulating ideas and we're merging them together. It's just what I said about hole number 10. It's a Redan par 4. Well, I've seen 3 of those now, like in magazines now. Redan par 4. And it's like, it wasn't even a concept. Now, I have to give Ron credit for that. It's like, we hit to a certain area of the fairway and let it roll onto the green, feed on. You got to hit a cut shot. And, instead of the Redan green where you hit on a certain portion of the green, the ball rolls and trickles over here. Golfers love that. I mean, there's certain courses, and that's what I said. It's just like some of these greens that are out here. Like, we emulated the 14th green at Augusta National. But we flip-flopped it. And people just love to see a putt go this way and that way and then cozy up close to the hole. Now, our green speeds out here are going to be reasonable, so we can hold these slopes. I mean, we're shooting for like 9, on the stemp meter, not 12. Right. Because some of them would be unplayable. And those greens, that a lot of people see from time to time on television, They were built in the era when they were rolling at 6.
Yeah.
You used to see these people cock their putters, just
Sure.
to make a putt.
But the list is really impressive. I mean, I was, going through the descriptions on the website, and then now coming out here, the inspirations and what you actually see in each hole. The first thing that I would say is that the variety of holes, is really, almost all over the place. I mean, but in the best way imaginable. I mean, the very first hole, you said inspired by Robert Trent Jones, but you and I played it, and I practically hooked my drive left, was able to find it, but then had this interesting angle where I could see a 3-tiered green with bunkers in front, and with a front pin location. It was very, you can see the sloping of the fairway, and so I just put one right, 125-yard shot, 10 yards in front of the green on the fairway, and it trickled right down to 5 feet.
Right.
There's a lot of that out here, which I think the average golfer in the Washington, D.C. area doesn't get a lot of that, of land movement and being able to use the slopes.
And that's what I think I've learned over the period of time is basically the intrigue you can put into a golf course. You don't have to do it by just over bunkering. You can just do it with landforms and movement and, creating, kick places.
Sure.
And, that's what is lacking in, so many golf courses is the intrigue. I mean, trust me, as I said, I get bored after a while,
Sure.
but I play this course all the time.
But you told me on the course that, so this is a huge property, 1,000 acres, but that, there's a tremendous amount of contours and land movement, but aside from a couple holes, not a lot of land was moved.
There was probably 30,000 yards of land. An average golf course is 300,000 to 400,000. All we did was create basins. I mean, we had a terrific shaper, and he basically tied in all those elements. And what the basins are doing is handling the drainage. So we pick up drainage on the high side, just like all these paths are canted into the hillside.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't get water going across our fairways. It all channels to an underground pipe and goes into another basin. And I can tell you, since this course opened, and they opened back, I think say it was July when we opened the 11 holes to play, they've never been on the cart paths only. In other words, this course drains so well. And it's a tribute, I can say I'd like to take all the credit, but I can't. That's really the shaping and, what went into the physical movement of the water and stuff, because boom, we've had like a couple days I came down here, it had rained for the previous 3 days, and we were on fairways. There was no reason to be on cart paths. Everything was dry. And you know how bad golfers can be. They'll find the wettest place and drive right through it and get the cart stuck. But they've never really had a problem with that out here. So that's one of the things I think I'm proudest of, how we handled the water and everything as far as the nuisance water, storm water, rainwater.
So, but there are a lot of unique, someone like myself who really, the majority of my golf is within striking distance of DC, hence the title of this show. There's a lot of features here that, I see in magazines and on social media, but that you don't get a ton around this area. And I'll go through a few of them here, but one of them I just learned today. Tailing piles. Piles. So I'll put a picture of it, but so another popular kind of golf course architecture feature are hummocks. But these kind of look like, but they're almost more pointed.
These basically, as I said, behind the third green, and all through this site, I mean, you can go down through every one of these little wetland areas right here, and you're going to see depressions where the miners dug out looking for gold and then created these little piles. Now, of course, a lot of these trees, now that we have wetlands, this has never been disturbed in the last 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was early 1900s that this, mining operation was happening. Right at the back of our driving range is the ruins of the Alley Cooper mine, which we're going to make a showpiece of. And, you know, I said there are mine shafts under all this property that go 300 feet straight down, and then they have horizontal shafts. So that's a little surprise for the golfers that they don't fall through.
Sure.
And, you know, so it's got an interesting history. Yeah. Well, they were marked. I told you about the situation on 14 where we sucked up 4 of them because they couldn't develop on them. So I did an alternate fairway. And that's how things, you know, evolve on a golf course.
Sure. The 5th hole here is another interesting one. So this is your the Pete Dye hole.
Well, and that basically, the last time Ron was here, it just happened to be coinciding with the day Pete Dye passed away. And Ron was very, very friendly with Pete and Alice, as I was. Pete and Alice, Pete was the president, I think 2 years before I became president, so we were on the executive committee. Alice kind of runs the show. And always did. And, you know, they were dear friends, and it was just like we were going to have kind of a, you know, a Pete Dye salute, but we just basically changed the whole thing to basically be a Pete Dye green. You know, we did the railroads, we did the pot bunkers, you know, we did the, you know, crushed granite and everything for like a waste area like he did down at Sawgrass.
It's a beautiful hole. It's got the split fairway, and it's kind of deceiving off the tee. You don't realize how much room you have on the right fairway. You can enter the green from either side. Rolling, you know.
So it's one of my favorite holes, and it's even more pretty because if you get up on the hill on the other side of the pond, you know, you look down on that and you see Contrary Creek in the background. Now, keep in mind, Cutalong is at Lake Anna. That's what it says. And the whole reason the club area is where it is, at one period of time, you could actually see a portion of the lake from up there. They're going to have to probably build a second story on their clubhouse to see it anymore. But that was, you know, as close as we really got. And if you go down to hole number 4, the lake is very close there. But 5, I originally had that green as close to Contrary Creek as the, you know, the wetlands and everything would permit. Then we changed it. I have 15 different plans back in my house of the 5th hole. And, you know, this is the final rendition. And that whole clearing that you saw behind, you know, the green there where you can see Contrary Creek, at least people now can see it. Because it's such an unusual thing in the fact because of the mining and the sulfur and all the things and the acid that they brought up, there's no vegetation that grows along Contrary Creek. So it's like being out in some of these places in Colorado or Montana or whatever, which is, you know, an unusual thing for Virginia.
Sure.
And of course the name Mineral Virginia, you know, didn't come from, you know, it came from the mining industry.
A couple other interesting holes. So you mentioned, you know, some Civil War sites and Ron is a Civil War buff. The 8th hole, the green complex on the 8th hole.
That is called the Stockade Redan, which is an actual fortification. It's not a Redan like the Redan hole in North Berwick, but the Stockade Redan.
But both Redans come from the etymology of the word, you know, a well
it's a fortification, yes, because they were cannon placements on all 3 levels. And the way that green sets up, you know, was find a hole for this, Tom, because that's our one Civil War thing, really. And what even became more intriguing, we let I think it was the phone company or whatever, stage a lot of their bucket trucks and everything up at the entrance for almost a year. And they had a lot of leftover telephone poles. So they said, do you guys want these? We said, sure. So I said, well, we're going to build a real stockade. So that bunker in the front, you know, was built with telephone poles. And I think that's quite attractive and, you know, gives more credence to the stockade. But that's an unusual hole to say the least. Obviously, you can approach it, you know, from one angle, which is what I usually choose to do. Mm-hmm. But the other angle is to go all the way down, you know, with your second shot for, you know, the approach if the pin's on the right side.
Sure.
So it's all to do with pin placement and, you know, the fact that I can't hit it all the way down to the other side now is, you know, probably why I choose to go up to the other
It's a great hole, and the green itself is I was just off the back, and there's really 3 major tiers, but because it's a V, it really feels like 5 separate areas that you could have 5 really distinct pin locations.
You definitely do.
But really cool. A couple more. So we already kind of touched on the par 4 Redan on the 10th, which is a great hole. I will point out my only birdie of the day, so I enjoyed that hole. You also touched on the 12th, your Biarritz.
It basically was something we just happened to find in the ground. It was an old excavation, whether it was from the mining days, I really can't say, but it was on an angle. And Ron and I both decided all Biarritzes are kind of straight on and down and then up, Yale and Ohio State, all these different places, Elk Ridge Club. So we decided to put ours on an angle. And it's rather unique to try to hold the green.
It's a beautiful green, but it also depends on which tee box you're playing. The further back you get, you're almost playing it sideways.
I was going to say that other tee box that you saw at 235 or whatever, the reason that was built was also to give the fact that there's lots right there that this hole is really a golf hole, because if not, they would have never seen the tee complex because they're behind trees. So there's reasons in home site developments that we do things to help the developer.
It's a lot. I mean, almost. I encourage anybody to go look at the Cutalong website, because there's descriptions in every hole, and some of them really go into detail on what the inspiration. And a lot of these holes have multiple inspirations. Replicating a bunker from Augusta on this hole. That may have been you said it was the first or the 10th that.
The 10th hole at Augusta, the bunker that nobody gets in.
But it's now replicated at a par 3 here.
Right.
So my point being, a lot of the holes here, it may have 2 or 3 different inspirations in a single hole.
Well, we borrowed, and it's just like the first hole, as you said. As a golfer, where do people collapse? They get nervous, whatever. The first hole, we have a fairway 100 yards wide.
Sure.
And even though you duck hooked it, you still found it, the fairway.
And I got it close enough to miss an easy birdie putt. Let's talk 1 minute about the 15th. So there's not too many punch bowl greens within striking distance of the DC area. A beautiful green. We're 2/3 or 3/4 around. With funnels down to a beautiful green there.
And that's one of my favorite holes out here, because we have multiple choices. You can hit it down the right side, which is a little more challenging, but then you have to go over the bunker in your approach shot, or you can hit it down the left, but if you hit it too far, you're in a wetland channel.
Yeah.
And, you have to basically plan accordingly. Club back and then hit a little longer club in, but then the whole punch bowl opens up to you.
Sure.
But of course, we left a few key trees there. Also, you have to wend your way through.
Sure.
So, as I said, it's been a lot of fun. And as I said, we're still not done all of our what we call select clearing. We're still working on some of that. We're still doing a little. We've had a couple wet weather springs pop up, so we're doing a little drainage work. But I say all in all, it's 100% ready for play and is being played. And a phenomenal amount of people have joined here, especially through this winter. I mean, they've added over 30 members, I think, in the winter, and that hardly ever happens.
So it's private course. At one point, maybe the previous owner, you had mentioned that at one point it was going to be public.
Definitely going to be public, yes.
And then
then it morphed into a golf course home site development where you would have a private membership. You'd have it open to the public also. So it's had several different things, and what we're kind of shooting for is like a destination resort, where people can come down here and play, because we want more people to enjoy this.
Sure.
We want our members to really, enjoy it and bring guests.
And we did so. So we mentioned we were joined, at least for a handful of holes, by Chris in sales and marketing here at Cutalong, and they are offering guest or a preview play. I think once a year, you can come down and play unaccompanied to check out the site and play the course. And he also mentioned that one of the goals he kind of just touched on was to build kind of some stay and play
That's going to be
options.
one of their huge draws down here. I mean, the owners, that's the first thing they're going to build is these stay and play units where they're expecting that basically people will buy those and put them in a rental pool, or they'll come down for the summer and then put them in a rental pool the rest of the year. But it's just, where you have a group, a foursome, you have an eightsome, a twelvesome, and get the boys together from Congressional or Chevy and come on down here and play. And then we're going to hopefully tie in with some of the neighbor courses like the Federal Club and Spring Creek and Keswick, and offer some packages.
Nice.
That's sales and marketing, not just architecture.
That's right. Well, I really enjoyed playing it. I think this is a tremendous addition. It's without traffic. It's about 90 minutes from DC.
There's never traffic.
There's never traffic on 95 South. But.
Yeah, I struggled for years going from McLean. Sometimes I would go out 66 and do the back roads. Unfortunately, now I only live an hour away, and it's all back roads, so I never have to hit 95. You mentioned when Brian wanted to come down, he looked at his route and he said, "I've got to go on 95. Can't we do this on a weekend?" I said, "Brian, the weekends are even worse on 95." Right. It's like, you try to go down 95 on a Saturday, Brian, then try to go back on a Sunday, you'll never make it. So I struggled for years, getting back and forth to the lake, and I'm so happy when I moved out to the country, my blood pressure went down, no traffic, nothing. I mean, also, I did a lot of military courses, and I did 23 holes at Fort Belvoir. In other words, I added 18, but to get all the starting and finishing points, we had to build 5 additional holes. So, and then...
and when you did that, because I've played at Fort Belvoir a couple times, you had to re-maneuver the original 18. In other words, take a couple of holes to reconfigure the full 36. Did I get that right?
Yeah, exactly, because that was part of their...
And I know Brian Auld has also done a handful of military courses. How did that kind of come about?
Well,
the association between military courses and your firm.
Well, Mr. Auld started. I mean, he did Langley, and added, and then we got involved with. There's like a procurement officer for like these military jobs, and he became kind of a friend, and he would alert us to some of these things coming up. I mean, we did some work up in Alaska, and then Fort's
on a military course.
I did Fort Eustis, and then we did some work in Georgia, and we did some military work in Korea. And it's just kind of one thing led to another, and Brian did Andrews Air Force Base. Like
is that in part
course.
The product that you figured out? How
they ask for a lot, meaning what they want is almost working drawings when you submit your proposal. So we were willing to do that. We'd route the course or whatever, and then show them how to build it and what it would cost. And
are you considered like a government contractor at that point?
Well,
like,
we basically knew how to fill out the forms. Let's just say that. We had to learn, because they have a certain way that literally everything has to be filled out and incrementally, for their cost estimating and everything, and we were pretty damn good at that. So, some of our guys focused a lot on military work, and I certainly enjoyed it. It just amazes me sometimes. It was like with Fort Belvoir, the last project that they wanted to do, I did all this preliminary work for them, and they had a contractor who was already under contract, and they didn't even pass on my name. They just gave it to another architect somewhere. So the last work there is not mine, and they did rearrange it again.
Is that right?
Yeah. So, and that's, one of your questions, what happens when other architects, come and look at your work or redo your work? Well, it's the nature of the business.
Yeah. I'm sure you've been on both sides of the coin.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, as I said, as a member of the American Society of Golf Architects, and if I'm called in to look at something, I call the original architect and say, "Bob," they said, "Go ahead, see what you can do." And the same happens to us.
Is that commonplace in the industry? Like, do they?
It is, because clubs always want to change something. They said, "Oh, so and so."
Right, but the communication between old architect and new.
If they're members of the American Society of Golf Architects, it's definitely typical. But, you know, not all these people are members, and sometimes the original architect is long since deceased. You know, I said I did a lot of work on Donald Ross courses, and couldn't call Donald, even though he's one of our members, but
in general, is it a very
born.
fraternal industry? I mean, because a lot of golf course architects have very different styles.
Yeah.
And, you know, some they're trying to, you know, when you were talking about congressional and going back to restoring the you know, what it looked like 100 years ago versus, you know, the Reese Jones and his father who read it in the middle. They modernize it. They might have totally different styles, but, you know, is there, you know, is there friendliness? Is there animosity between them?
There's a huge friendliness in the fact that I'm a past president of the American Society of Golf Architects. I count some of my best friends as members. We talk to each other all the time. We compete against each other. You know, and this is said, there are, you know, nothing but, you know, I think 95% stellar individuals in that, you know, group. And, you know, in anything, you know, any society, any grouping, you know, there's occasionally some bad eggs or whatever, but, you know, they get sorted out. And, you know, it's just the nature of human nature, because you're in an artistic profession. You don't always have to like what, you know, your friend does, per se. You know, I would have put this bunker over here, or I maybe would have put that green contour.
What about going all the way back to Mr. Alt? You know, Mr. Alt, you know, you mentioned had a very nominal fee. Would that, you know, if I'm another architect that charges 10 times that or 20 times that, am I getting angry that, like, oh, Ed, you know, you're
Ed Alt was actually,
I can't compete with that.
Invited to become a member of the American Society of Golf Architects. One of the reasons was they wanted to set a standard, say, please charge 10%. Well, you know, he said, well, I am. They didn't realize he was building courses for $300,000. He should have been charging $3,000, not $6,000. It's like, because, you know, they were building them for, you know, $2 million or something.
Right.
So they were getting $200,000.
Right.
But that was one of the things. And as I said, Ed Alt was, you know, by admission, he was an engineer. I mean, I'm a landscape architect, and, you know, I think of beauty and style, and I mean, bunkering especially. You know, Ed was, you know, more of a practician. In other words, if he thought a bunker needed to be 210 yards, I mean, when I started, our landing areas were 250 from the back tees. That's all pros were hitting it.
Right.
Well, now you look at Bryson, he's hitting it almost 350.
Sure, right.
So, I mean, things have changed tremendously. But the thing was, he would just put a bunker, even if it was in a swale. And I'm like, you know, we put them, I mean, I try to put them where they fit in, and you can just grade them naturally. And he would import dirt, you know, and fill this thing up, and it looks like a, you know, a little something. So the aesthetics weren't there, but the practicality was. I mean, he built sound golf courses, playable golf courses, well-drained golf courses, and that's the first thing I learned was drainage is paramount. That's the first thing he said, drainage, drainage, drainage. And it's like, go ahead.
I was going to ask, do you think much or think a lot about your legacy as a golf course architect, having designed over 100 courses?
I do not. I mean, I know that the beauty is that, you know, for instance, I keep trying to tell my owners or whatever, you may not be here. The contractor, you know, may be off the face of the earth. The pro definitely will be gone somewhere else. The superintendent's somewhere else. But the architect who did the course is still always the architect. So that's the beauty of our profession. I mean, it's like, you know, building architects. Well, you know, the Empire State Building is still there. And, you know, whoever did that, you know, can say, well, he's long gone.
Sure.
The Eiffel Tower is still there. And, you know, you create something, you know, special that, you know, is there for posterity. Now, that's why I said it hurts when they take one of your babies away. I mean, I was probably the king of par 3 courses for a while, But most of my par threes are gone. I had a couple in Myrtle Beach, Cane Patch and Midway. I had, the Bray Links par three at, Kings Mill. I had the one at Cahoon Plantation. I had the one at Fair Oaks Golf Park. I could rattle off half a dozen more that are all gone. That's a shame because par threes is, where I learned to play golf.
Right.
A little place in Delaware. And a lot of kids learn to play. That's their first, introduction to golf.
The one out near Rehoboth Beach?
No, it was up near Wilmington. I'm trying to think of its name, but
And the irony is par threes seem to be making a comeback.
Well, it's funny because I see a lot of things in magazines now, and I wish I had my par threes still alive and well. And they were a lot of them, for instance, the ones in Myrtle Beach were done for Myrtle Beach Farms Company, and that became Burroughs and Collins. But they were an interim use. They weren't supposed to, be there after 10 years. They were going to develop it. Well, they were there 30 years or something, or 40, because they were making more money than their 18-hole courses were. Go figure.
Yeah.
Well, they lit them, and they added 9 more holes in a driving range. And, we did that. And consequently, they were making more money than, the rest of the thing.
Yeah. Oakmar is one of yours. It's a par three that's still kicking. I played that within the last month or so.
Well, and Penderbrook was another. That was one of my first courses. That you met Mike earlier, and he's doing the management up there. That was an interesting story because the owner, Wayne Lynch, was it White Flint or White Oak Mall or whatever?
White Flint Mall, sure.
Yeah. That was, I think, Pinecrest #1, the golf course. He owned that and he sold it. So he got the money to buy the property across the street and built Penderbrook. Well, when Penderbrook was built, I'll never forget, Wayne says, "Oh, I'll just get the superintendent to do all the select clearing over the winter and stuff." Well, one winter, the next winter, it went on and on. Yeah. And, if you didn't hit the rough and you got into the woods, you'd never find your ball.
Sure.
But then Wayne, all of a sudden called up another day, and that's where Southview was built over there, across, over in Maryland.
Waldorf, yeah.
So I'm not sure Wayne's still with us, but, that was 2 golf courses. And that's what happens when I did River Creek, then I did Cross Creek and Oak Creek. One developer likes what you do and, says, "Oh, we'll just hire Tom to do the next one." So that's, it's
What's the story with that barn over at Oak Creek? What is it?
The tobacco barn?
Is that what it is?
It's an old tobacco barn you drive through with the cart path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great barn.
And now, who took that over? Basically, Club Corp has it now, but it was Toll Golf.
It was a private course when it opened, right?
Yeah, that was a mistake. There was I guess a management company from up in Pennsylvania, and it was funny because I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I didn't even recognize any of the courses that he managed. He never came down to visit. So it didn't really make it as a private course. And it was funny because I kept saying that Lake Presidential, which was built the same time approximately, I said they should have switched it. That should have been private. And, Oak Creek should have been public. And it is now. Yeah. I do not know what kind of condition it's in. That's the biggest thing from a golf course architect's perspective. We are at the hands of the superintendent, who is at the hands, really, of the management.
Are you always notified, if they make changes? Let's say,
not always.
Oak Creek, are you 100% certain, for example, Oak Creek looks the way that you built it?
I know it isn't, because they went in there and they invited me over after the fact and said, "How do you like what we've done?" I'm like, "Well, I can't endorse this. I love it."
Give me an example of what they changed.
The bunkering. We had, very unique bunkering over there. Niebuhr Golf built it. Joe Niebuhr was the owner. He actually took a couple months off his job as a golf construction guy and got on the dozer and did a lot of work there. And, the end product was really fun. I loved playing it, and it was aesthetically pleasing to the eye. And, it's still a good golf course. The bones are still there. but it's just basically some of the bunkering, went away, and with that, some of what I call my pizzazz went away. But
Sure.
it's still a good golf course. The greens are exactly the same.
Well, listen, we're starting to run out of sunlight here.
And
We've been
I'm
chatting
getting
for
freaking cold.
we've
My
been
shirt
chatting.
sleeve
I was gonna
shirt
say we've
here.
been chatting for a while. The temperature's dropping. I feel like you've done enough work in the area that I could talk to you for another hour or two. But this has been terrific. I appreciate you taking some time to kind of talk about your career as a golf course architect, bringing me out to Cutalong, showing me the course, and I had a great time.
Well, we want you to come back.
I don't have a good golf game, but I don't really care. I'm a regular dude living in DC, and I want to know about DC-centric golf stuff. If you can tell me something that I don't already know, then that is great for me. I don't want the regular stuff. I want exciting stuff. I want different stuff. I want stuff I can't hear elsewhere. But I want it to be about DC golf.